Sarah Martinez walked into her new house on a quiet Saturday afternoon. The late summer sun made the windows of her home sparkle like diamonds. At 35 years old, she had finally bought her dream house in Oakwood Hills, one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. The moving trucks had just left, and boxes were still scattered everywhere. She was excited to start fresh in this peaceful place. The doorbell rang, and Sarah smiled. It was her father, James. His silver hair caught the sunlight as he stepped inside. "Dad, you made it." Sarah hugged him tight. James was a retired police officer who had worked the streets for 30 years. His eyes still had that sharp, watchful look that cops never really lose. "This place is beautiful, honey," James said, looking around. "You picked a good spot." He had always worried about his daughter living alone, especially with her unusual job. But Oakwood Hills seemed perfect: safe streets, friendly neighbors, and a strong community association that watched over everything. What Sarah's neighbors didn't know was that their newest resident was no ordinary woman. She trained the toughest warriors in America. Every day, she pushed Navy SEALs through brutal exercises that would break most people. Her job required her to be stronger, faster, and smarter than the elite soldiers she trained. But in her new neighborhood, she looked just like any other resident, except maybe a bit more fit than most. The Oakwood Hills HOA was famous for keeping everything perfect. Lawns had to be cut to exact heights. Houses needed to match specific colors. Even the mailboxes had to look the same. The HOA board took their rules very seriously, and they had a team of volunteers who helped enforce them. Among these volunteers was Dale Henderson. At 52, Dale had always dreamed of being a real cop, but it never happened. Instead, he spent his time buying military gear from surplus stores and patrolling the neighborhood like he owned the place. He wore a badge he bought online and carried a gun, even though he had no real authority. Dale had a particular way of doing things. He would drive his pickup truck slowly through the streets, looking for anything out of place. His garage was full of tactical equipment, camouflage clothes, and police scanners. He told everyone he was a former Marine, though nobody had ever seen proof. The neighbors mostly tried to avoid him, but the HOA board thought he was helpful, if a bit intense. Sarah unpacked boxes while her father helped arrange furniture. They talked about her work and laughed about old memories. Neither of them knew that their new neighbor, Dale, was already watching from his living room window. He had noticed the moving trucks earlier and was curious about who was moving in. His binoculars stayed trained on Sarah's house as the afternoon wore on. "You know, honey," James said, "I feel better knowing you're in a place like this. Good security, nice people, and those HOA folks seem to really care about keeping things safe." Little did they know that the very person meant to keep the neighborhood safe would soon become their biggest problem. 2 weeks after moving in, Sarah's life settled into a routine. Her days started early with a 5-mile run around the neighborhood before heading to the naval base where she trained the best of the best. She wore regular gym clothes during her morning runs. Nothing fancy, just black leggings and a simple t-shirt, but what she carried in her small backpack would surprise most people. Along with her water bottle and phone, she had tactical gear from her training sessions that she hadn't had time to remove. One Thursday night, after an especially long day of training exercises, Sarah drove through the Oakwood Hills main gate around 10 p.m. She was exhausted, still wearing her workout clothes covered in dirt and sweat. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face showed the tiredness of someone who had pushed herself to the limit. As she approached the gate, bright headlights suddenly blinded her. A pickup truck pulled directly in front of her car, blocking the entrance. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She noted the position of the truck, the time, and any possible escape routes, all in less than 3 seconds. A man stepped out of the truck. He was shorter than Sarah, but moved with an aggressive confidence that screamed wannabe authority. Dale Henderson walked toward her car with a flashlight in one hand and his other hand resting on the gun at his hip. The beam of light was pointed directly at her face, making it hard to see. "Hold it right there." Dale's voice cut through the night air. This is a private community. You can't just drive through here whenever you want." Sarah rolled down her window and spoke calmly. "I live here. I'm at 423 Maple Street." Her military training had taught her to maintain composure in tense situations. "Yeah, prove it." Dale leaned closer to her car, his flashlight still in her face. "I've never seen you around here before. What's in that bag? Why are you dressed like that?" Sarah reached for her wallet slowly, making sure to keep her hands visible. She handed him her driver's license and the HOA resident card they had given her when she moved in. "Here's my identification. I just moved in 2 weeks ago." Dale snatched the cards from her hand and examined them with exaggerated importance. "Martinez, huh? This could be fake. Anyone can make these cards nowadays." He shone his flashlight inside her car, looking at her backpack and gym equipment. "What's all that tactical stuff for? You running some kind of operation out of here?" "I work as a fitness instructor," Sarah said, keeping her answer simple. She had learned not to advertise her real job. It often made people uncomfortable. "I train people in military-style workouts." Dale's expression turned suspicious. "Military training? Are you even supposed to have that kind of equipment? This neighborhood has rules, you know. We don't need people bringing war games into our peaceful community." Sarah felt her patience wearing thin, but maintained her professional demeanor. "Sir, I've shown you my ID. I live here legally. I'd like to go home now if you don't mind. It's been a long day." "Watch your tone with me, lady." Dale's voice rose. His hand moved closer to his gun. "I'm neighborhood security. I decide who comes and goes. You better remember that." After a tense 5-minute standoff, Dale finally stepped back and waved her through with obvious reluctance. "I'll be watching you, Martinez. One wrong move, and you're out of here." As Sarah drove away, she looked in her rearview mirror and saw Dale writing something in a small notebook. She had a sinking feeling this was just the beginning of their problems. The next day, Sarah found her first parking ticket stuck under her windshield wiper. The orange paper fluttered in the morning breeze as she walked to her car for her daily run. She pulled it off and read the violation. "Vehicle parked 6 inches from curb. Maximum allowed 4 inches. The fine was $50. Sarah looked at her car, then at her neighbor's car parked in the exact same manner. No ticket on theirs. She took a photo with her phone and tucked the ticket into her pocket. Something told her she'd need evidence later. Over the following weeks, the harassment escalated. Every morning, Dale would drive by her house slowly, sometimes making 2 or 3 passes. He'd sit in his truck, writing in his notebook while staring at her property. Sarah started documenting everything: license plate, time, date, and descriptions of his behavior. One afternoon, while she was mowing her lawn, Dale appeared at her fence line. "Your grass is too long," he announced, though she'd cut it just 2 days ago. HOA regulation says maximum height is 3 inches. He held up a small ruler dramatically. "Would you like to measure it together?" Sarah offered politely, though inside she was seething. Dale's face reddened. "Don't get smart with me. I know what I see. I'll write you up for this." Her mailbox became another target. Dale complained it was 1 inch to the left of proper alignment. Then came noise complaints, submitted at 7 p.m. while she was cooking dinner. During one of her father's visits, James noticed the pile of citations on her kitchen counter. "Honey, this is getting out of hand," he said, reading through them. 15 tickets in 3 weeks. This isn't normal." "I know, Dad. I'm keeping records of everything," Sarah replied, showing him her phone with timestamp photos and videos. But the HOA board doesn't seem to care. They say Dale is just enthusiastic about community standards. What Sarah didn't tell her father was what worried her most. Through her security camera footage, she'd observed Dale's concerning behavior around his gun. He would practice quick draws in his yard, spinning the weapon like a cowboy. During their confrontations, his hand would twitch near his holster whenever he got angry. Her military training recognized these as signs of someone who wasn't properly trained in firearm safety. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down, approached her while she was getting mail one evening. "I'm so sorry about Dale," the elderly woman whispered. "He did the same thing to the young couple who lived here before you. They eventually moved out. He doesn't like anyone he thinks is different." "Has anyone reported him to the police?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Patterson shook her head sadly. "His brother-in-law is on the HOA board. They always dismiss complaints. We just try to stay out of his way." That night, Sarah reviewed her security footage frame by frame. She watched Dale patrol past her house 18 times in one evening. She saw him standing at her driveway for 10 minutes, just staring at her home. In one clip, he was on her porch, looking through her window before leaving another citation. The pattern was clear. Dale was targeting her specifically. She began sleeping lighter, her military training keeping her alert for any unusual sounds. Her experience told her this situation would likely escalate before it improved. She continued documenting everything, building her case methodically, just as she'd been trained to gather intelligence in her work. Sarah had faced much more dangerous situations in her career, but there was something unsettling about being harassed in a place that was supposed to be home. Still, she wasn't about to let fear control her life or force her out of her new neighborhood. Ree HOA. 3 months into living at Oakwood Hills, Sarah had established a predictable evening routine. Mondays meant grocery shopping after work, and this particular Monday was no different. The October air had turned crisp and darkness fell earlier now. After an exhausting day of training 5 SEAL candidates through underwater exercises, Sarah was looking forward to a quiet evening at home. The neighborhood was unusually quiet as she drove to the local supermarket. She grabbed her reusable bags and headed inside, still wearing her workout clothes, simple black athletic shorts and a navy tank top. Her hair was still damp with sweat, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She moved quickly through the aisles, filling her cart with the usual items: chicken, vegetables, protein shakes, and high-energy snacks that fueled her demanding lifestyle. By the time she finished shopping, the parking lot had emptied considerably. Sarah loaded her bags into the trunk, her arms aching slightly from the day's training. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows as she pushed her cart to the return area. That's when she heard the familiar rumble of Dale's pickup truck. Her heart rate stayed steady. Years of training had taught her to control her physiological responses to stress. She watched in her peripheral vision as the truck circled the lot once, then twice, before pulling up directly behind her car, blocking her exit. Dale stepped out, and something was different about him tonight. His eyes were wild, almost manic. He was wearing his tactical vest with various pockets and patches, though no identifying marks of any real authority. His hand rested on the holster at his hip, fingers drumming against the leather. "Look who we have here," Dale's voice slurred slightly. "The military wannabe who thinks she runs this neighborhood." The smell of alcohol hit Sarah from 6 feet away. "Good evening, Dale," Sarah responded calmly, placing her hands where he could see them, a habit that kept situations from escalating. "I'm just heading home from grocery shopping." "Heading home? In this late hour? Looking like you've been doing who knows what." Dale stepped closer, his movement unsteady. "I've been watching you, Martinez. You're up to something. All that equipment, those weird hours, acting like you own the place." Sarah's training kicked in. She assessed his stance. Drunk, unbalanced, one hand on his weapon. She noted the distance between them, 12 feet. She calculated the nearest cover, a concrete pillar 8 feet to her left. Her options remained open. "I understand you're concerned about the neighborhood," Sarah said, keeping her voice level and non-threatening. "But I'm just a resident here like you. I pay my HOA fees, follow the rules, and respect my neighbors." "Following the rules?" Dale laughed harshly. "You think you're better than everyone else. All you military types do." His hand gripped the gun handle now. "You know what? I'm tired of your attitude. I'm tired of you thinking you can ignore me. The parking lot felt impossibly quiet. Sarah's mind processed multiple scenarios simultaneously. This was what her job trained her for, though she'd never expected to use these skills in a suburban grocery store parking lot. Dale, she said carefully, I can see you're upset. How about we talk about this tomorrow, when we've both had some rest? I'll head home now, and we can discuss any concerns through the HOA office. No, Dale's shout echoed across the empty lot. In one fluid motion, he drew his weapon, pointing it directly at Sarah's chest. You're going to listen to me for once, and you're going to learn some respect. Sarah's world shifted into slow motion. Every detail crystallized. The slight tremor in Dale's hand, the safety still engaged on his weapon, his poor grip on the handle. Her training had prepared her for this exact moment, though she prayed it would never come to this in her own neighborhood. Time seemed to suspend as Sarah prepared to act. Sarah's breathing remained controlled as she processed the situation. Years of training had wired her brain to operate differently in moments like these. While Dale stood there with his weapon pointed at her, Sarah's mind was already 10 steps ahead. She noticed his thumb wasn't on the safety. Rookie mistake number 1. His elbow was too high. Mistake number 2. His feet were positioned too close together. Mistake number 3. Dale, you don't want to do this, Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. She kept her hands slightly raised, palms facing outward. Her feet shifted almost imperceptibly into a more balanced stance. Think about what you're doing. This isn't who you are. Dale's hand shook. The alcohol in his system made his grip unstable. Don't tell me who I am. You don't know anything about me. You military people always think you know everything. Sarah's eyes never left his weapon. She calculated the distance, 8 feet. She could see sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool evening air. His breathing was rapid, shallow. Signs of panic. She knew panic could make people unpredictable. In the corner of her eye, she spotted movement. Mrs. Chen, another resident, was walking to her car 3 rows over. Sarah needed to end this before an innocent bystander got involved. You're right, Sarah acknowledged, using a technique she'd learned in de-escalation training. I don't know everything. Help me understand what's bothering you. Dale's eyes widened with confusion at her agreement. It was the opening she needed. In that split second of hesitation, Sarah moved. Her body flowed like water in a controlled movement she'd practiced thousands of times. Her left hand snapped up to control the weapon's muzzle, pushing it away from her body. Simultaneously, she stepped offline, moving out of the gun's line of fire. Her right hand grabbed Dale's wrist with precise force. Dale's surprise turned to pain as Sarah applied pressure to specific nerve points she knew by heart. The gun dropped from his hand, clattering harmlessly on the asphalt. Before he could react, she had already swept his legs, bringing him down to the ground in a controlled takedown that minimized injury. Within 3 seconds, Dale was face down on the parking lot ground. Sarah had one knee on his back, keeping him pinned but not hurting him. Her other hand secured both his wrists behind his back in a position that prevented resistance without causing damage. Stay down, she commanded in a voice that carried authority. You're not hurt, but don't move. Dale groaned beneath her, the alcohol and shock leaving him dazed. You can't do this to me. You can't. I just did, Sarah replied calmly. She looked up to see Mrs. Chen staring in shock, her phone already out and recording. Call 911, please, Sarah instructed her. Tell them there's been an assault with a deadly weapon. Sarah maintained control of the situation with minimal force. This was what she'd been trained for. Protecting people without causing unnecessary harm, even to the aggressor. Her heart rate was elevated but controlled. Her breathing remained steady. She'd handled far more dangerous situations during her military career. I'm going to lose everything, Dale mumbled into the pavement. My job, my position. You pointed a weapon at an unarmed woman, Sarah stated factually. The consequences are yours to deal with. Within 5 minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah remained in position, keeping Dale secure until help arrived. She'd done exactly what she'd been trained to do: neutralize a threat with minimum necessary force. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who'd spent months trying to intimidate her had never realized he was targeting someone far more skilled than he could imagine. Blue lights flashed across the parking lot as 3 police cruisers arrived. Sarah remained in her position, keeping Dale restrained but not causing him any harm. As officers approached with their weapons drawn, she spoke clearly. "I'm the victim here. He pulled a gun on me. I'm trained, and I've secured him safely." The lead officer stopped and peered closer at Sarah in the dim light. Recognition dawned on his face. "Martinez, is that you from the SEAL training base?" "Yes, sir," Sarah confirmed. "I instructed at your department's joint operations drill last month." The tension in the air shifted immediately. The officers lowered their weapons and quickly took control of Dale. Sarah stepped back, brushing off her clothes, while explaining the sequence of events. The head detective was someone she trained personally, a fact that made her account carry significant weight. "He's been harassing me for months," Sarah explained as they photographed the scene and collected the dropped weapon. "I have documentation and security footage at home." Dale, now handcuffed and sitting against a cruiser, suddenly seemed smaller than before. The bravado had evaporated with the alcohol wearing off and reality setting in. "It wasn't loaded," he mumbled weakly. "I would never actually hurt anyone." The officers exchanged knowing looks. One held up the weapon they'd retrieved. "It's loaded, Dale. Full magazine." Mrs. Chen approached the officers with her phone. "I recorded everything." He pointed the gun at her first. She only reacted to protect herself. Back at the station, Sarah gave her official statement while simultaneously calling her father and then the HOA board. The board members seemed stunned when police informed them about Dale's arrest. They suddenly discovered a newfound interest in investigating his behavior. "We had no idea he was this unstable," the HOA president stammered during a hastily arranged meeting the next morning. The same board members who had dismissed complaints for months now scrambled to distance themselves from Dale. "He fooled all of us," another board member added weakly. "He seemed so enthusiastic about security." Sarah remained calm but direct. "He's been harassing residents for months. You have files of complaints that were ignored." Mrs. Patterson, the Johnsons, and at least 4 other families complained about his behavior. The investigation expanded quickly. Police discovered Dale's weapon wasn't properly registered. His military service was fabricated. He'd never served in any branch. His volunteer security position was unofficial, something he'd created himself that the HOA had tacitly accepted without proper vetting. Within days, the local news picked up the story. HOA volunteer arrested after threatening Navy SEAL instructor became a headline that shocked the quiet suburb. Sarah's real job finally came to light, though she requested minimal coverage to maintain operational security for her work. The transformation in how neighbors treated her was immediate. People she'd barely spoken to before now approached with apologies and offers of support. Some admitted they'd been afraid of Dale too, but hadn't known how to handle the situation. Sarah's father arrived that weekend, his chest swollen with pride. "You handled that exactly right, honey. Defended yourself without becoming the aggressor." Standing in her kitchen while he fixed them both coffee, Sarah reflected on the strange twist of fate. The man who'd tried to intimidate her for being different had never realized he was targeting someone trained to handle far more dangerous situations. His prejudice had blinded him to the reality of who she really was. "You know what this means?" her father asked with a knowing smile. Sarah nodded. "Changes need to happen here. Real ones." The Oakwood Hills community stood at a crossroads, and Sarah found herself unexpectedly positioned to guide them toward meaningful reform. The courtroom proceedings moved quickly. Dale pleaded guilty to assault with a deadly weapon, facing a minimum sentence of 3 years. His lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity due to alcohol consumption, but the evidence of months-long harassment contradicted this defense. The judge was unmoved by Dale's tears and apologies. "You created a culture of fear in your own neighborhood," the judge stated firmly. "You used a firearm to intimidate residents who had every right to be there. Your actions endangered the very community you claimed to protect." Word spread quickly through Oakwood Hills. The trial exposed not just Dale's behavior, but the HOA board's negligence in ignoring repeated warnings. 3 board members resigned in shame, opening the door for fresh leadership. At the next HOA meeting, packed with residents who had previously felt too intimidated to attend, Sarah stood up to speak. The room fell silent. These neighbors had only recently learned their quiet resident was a Navy SEAL trainer, though her humble demeanor hadn't changed. "We need professional security," Sarah began. "Not wannabe cops playing soldier. Real training, real protocols, real accountability." Her words carried weight now, not just because of her credentials, but because she'd lived through what others had only feared. By unanimous vote, the community approved hiring actual security professionals. The HOA allocated funds for proper training and background checks. They implemented a strict policy: no armed volunteers without law enforcement certification. Sarah's expertise became invaluable. Working with her father, they helped establish de-escalation training for the new security team. The focus shifted from intimidation to community service. New guards learned to identify genuine threats versus personal grudges. 6 months later, transformation swept through Oakwood Hills. The once tense atmosphere lifted. Residents walked their dogs without anxiety. Kids played in streets that felt truly safe, not just controlled. The Community Garden Project, which Dale had repeatedly disrupted with citations, flourished with neighbors working together. Mrs. Patterson approached Sarah at the weekly farmers market. "Thank you," she said simply. "You didn't just save yourself that night. You saved all of us from living in fear." The biggest change came through education. Sarah organized free self-defense classes for residents, emphasizing awareness and de-escalation over conflict. Her father assisted, sharing his police experience about recognizing threatening behavior early. Both emphasized that real security comes from community connection, not intimidation. During one evening class, a teenager raised her hand. "What if we see someone acting like Dale did? How do we know if they're actually dangerous?" Sarah considered carefully. "Look for patterns. Document behavior. Trust your instincts but verify with facts. A true protector doesn't need to make you afraid." The changes resonated beyond Oakwood Hills. Neighboring communities adopted similar reforms, learning from their example. The local police department invited Sarah to help train officers in community relations, bridging the gap between military precision and civilian protection. 1 year after that frightening night in the parking lot, Sarah sat on her porch watching families walk by. Her house no longer felt like a target but a true home. The security officer on duty, properly trained, properly vetted, waved as he passed on his rounds. Her neighbor's daughter stopped by with homemade lemonade. "My mom says you're a hero," the girl said shyly. Sarah smiled, remembering her own childhood admiration for strong women. Anyone can stand up to bullies. It just takes courage and preparation. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink over Oakwood Hills. Peace wasn't just the absence of fear anymore. It had become the presence of genuine community. Dale's trial was never even appealed. He now spent his time in rehabilitation, hopefully learning the difference between protection and intimidation. Sarah's story became local legend, but she preferred the quieter legacy. A neighborhood where safety meant feeling secure at home, not being terrorized by those claiming to.